Hello everyone. I hope you're all doing well over lockdown. So this week, Claudia has tasked me with making some instructional videos on classic cocktails. So this week it's one of my favorites, and that's the Martini. So I'm going to keep it really simple and use things that you should have at home or things that you'd be able to find in corner shops, as is the theme with the majority of these instructional videos at the moment. So just going to run through a quick list of what you might need. First and foremost, you need a spirit of your choice, classically either gin or vodka. So I'm using Ford's Gin, Officer's Reserve. Second ingredient to the Martini is dry vermouth. I'm using Martini extra dry, but again, up to preference, whatever you want. And third is a garnish. I'm using a little lemon coin or a lemon twist. You can either use an olive, or you can turn it into a Gibson by using a pickled onion. They're delicious. Or you can use a black olive and make it a drink called a Buckeye, which is not as nice as the others, really. And then in terms of equipment, you'll need something to mix it in. And so I'm using a pint glass today, something to stir with. I've got this huge chopstick, and something to measure your ingredients out with. So I'm using jiggers today, but you could use anything that gets your ratios roughly right. So it could be like a shot glass or a little mug or whatever, really. So two things that I always do when I'm making sort of an easy martini at home. The first is I keep my vermouth in the fridge at all times. And before I'm going to make the martini, I often put the vessel that I'm going to be mixing it in the freezer alongside the glass. And that's ahead of time, just to make sure that your glass is really frozen and cold, so it doesn't increase the temperature when you pour it in. And using a frozen mixing vessel, whether it be a pint glass or a mixing glass, whatever, just ensures that you're essentially making the drink as cold as possible. And a martini, unlike a lot of other cocktails to this degree, is one of those drinks that calls for being like bitingly cold. It should be quite bracing, right? So grab my mixing vessel. So I've got this crispy, fresh, frozen pint glass. I'm going to be doing a dry martini today. So I'm going to be adding roughly 10 milliliters of dry vermouth, followed by about 60 milliliters of gin. Again, the ratios you can change. Classic dry martini, I usually do about 10 milliliters of dry vermouth to about 60 or 70 milliliters of spirit. But if you want to make it a bit softer, you can turn it into a wet martini, which for me, I do about 20 to 25, right up to 30, and then keep the 60 or 70 measure of spirit. Or you can even do a half and half, which is delicious, slightly lower in ABV, just a bit softer, especially if you're drinking earlier in the day. So I'm now going to add ice to my mixing glass. Now this ice has come straight out of the freezer, which is really useful, because again, you just want to make sure everything is as cold as possible. I'm going to give it a stir. Now this can sometimes take a little while depending on your equipment and the temperature of everything. I wouldn't look into that too much, because who wants to worry when they're making drinks for themselves and their flatmates and friends and family at home, whatever. But just bear in mind that sometimes you might need to take a little bit of time, and it's also up to preference. Like, dilution is quite important in a martini, and then also temperature is really, really important. But if you like the martinis a little bit more sort of biting and a bit more tight, that's fine. If you like them a little bit softer, just make sure you're stirring enough to get a little bit more water in there. One thing to ensure as well when you're making a martini is that the ice level is always above the liquid. You want to get as much ice in there as possible, because as the ice dilutes, obviously it chills the drink significantly. And the frozen glass here is just making sure that all that heat that's being pulled out of the ingredients is coming, or rather used to make the ice melt, is coming solely from the gin and the vermouth. So it's just going to make it as cold as possible, really. So I'm just going to keep going with this for a little while. Now, if I was super cool, I'd have a metal straw here that I could taste out of, because one of the most important things with any sort of stirred classic drink is that you're tasting as you go. Just to check if it needs a little bit more dilution, check the temperature or whatever. But in this case, I don't have a nifty straw. I mean, you could just use a spoon if you wanted to or something. I think we're almost there now. Another thing also is that when you're holding the mixing glass, it's quite important that you hold it at the bottom, because if you've got your whole hand wrapped around it, you know, the ice is just going to use heat from your hand to melt the drink, and you're not going to make the martini as cold as possible. Your hands are warm and the drink is cold, so just, you know, make sure that you're not grabbing it, or like, you know, grabbing it as least as possible. Cool. All right, I'd imagine we're about there, hopefully. So now I'm going to grab my glass. Again, I've kept in the freezer. And I'm not particularly prepared, obviously, with loads of equipment, and I haven't got a strainer, but what I do have is this, and hopefully this works. And this could end really badly. If it goes well, it'll be pretty cool. Let's have a look. Great. So, nice wash line, comes up to like a presentable level-ish. And then I'm just going to give it a little squeeze. This is just a lemon coin. You can use a lemon twist, obviously, if you want. Just make sure that the outside, the skin is facing the drink. From a little distance, give it a squeeze, and you'll see a lot of oils express over the drink. Just going to pop that in, and that's it. So that's my preferred style of martini. It's a dry gin martini with a lemon twist. And yeah, hopefully you'll all make one over lockdown. It should make things a little bit easier and a bit more fun. Thank you.